Cleopatra, The Power of a Queen in a Man's World. Written and published by C.Irmici. Feel free to subscribe for more content. Now let's get into the book. Introduction. The Enigma of Cleopatra. Cleopatra VII, the last queen of ancient Egypt, remains one of history's most captivating figures. Her name is synonymous with both beauty and intrigue, yet these descriptions fall short of the true depth of her power and legacy. Cleopatra was far more than a mere queen adorned in silk and jewels. She was a political genius, a cultural diplomat, and a fierce leader who ruled in a world where power was largely reserved for men. Her life and legacy challenge us to look beyond the surface, delving into the incredible achievements and hardships she faced as a female ruler in one of history's most turbulent periods. Born into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a lineage of Greek origin, Cleopatra was raised in a family both wealthy and fractured by internal power struggles. Her path to the throne was neither simple nor secure, requiring intelligence, determination, and an uncanny sense of timing. From an early age, Cleopatra understood that survival in Alexandria's royal court depended on more than heritage or beauty. It required strategy, diplomacy, and an awareness of Egypt's complex relationship with the expanding Roman Empire. She embraced the role of ruler with a clear vision, leveraging her intellect and influence to cement Egypt's sovereignty amidst the threat of Roman domination. Cleopatra's reign intersected with the lives of some of the most powerful men of her time, including Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Yet her relationships with these leaders were not merely romantic. They were strategic alliances forged to secure her rule and protect her people. Cleopatra understood that her country's independence was at stake, and she used her intelligence, charm, and cultural knowledge to outmaneuver adversaries and allies alike. Her story is as much about statecraft as it is about passion, revealing a queen who balanced her personal desires with the relentless demands of her office. As we explore her journey, we will uncover a Cleopatra who was multilingual, educated, and fiercely devoted to her nation. We will witness her tactical skill in navigating both Egyptian and Roman politics, her courage in facing opposition from within and without, and the tragic end that sealed her story as a symbol of resilience and power. Cleopatra's life was filled with grandeur, but it was also marked by sacrifice and challenge, as she walked a line between ruler and revolutionary in a world that was not ready for her. This book will take you through the different phases of her life, revealing how Cleopatra not only survived but thrived in a patriarchal world. It is an invitation to look past the myths and into the real legacy of a woman who, against all odds, made her mark on history and reshaped the notion of what a queen could be. Chapter 1. A Queen is Born. Early Life and the Ptolemaic Dynasty. Cleopatra's story begins with the Ptolemaic dynasty, a lineage steeped in tradition, wealth, and influence that ruled Egypt following the conquest of Alexander the Great in 332 BC. For nearly 300 years, the Ptolemaic dynasty held Egypt's throne, blending Greek and Egyptian cultures, customs, and religious practices. The dynasty's power was immense, yet it was built on a fragile balance, threatened constantly by family conflicts, ambitions for power, and a precarious relationship with the growing might of Rome. Cleopatra's lineage alone reveals much about the character she would need to develop to survive and thrive as Egypt's last queen. Born in 69 BC, Cleopatra was the daughter of Ptolemy XII, a ruler more interested in luxury and self-preservation than in the stability of his kingdom. The royal court of Alexandria, where she was raised, was vibrant and cosmopolitan, blending Greek learning with Egyptian traditions. Cleopatra's family traced their ancestry to one of Alexander the Great's generals, and they took pride in their Macedonian Greek heritage, even as they ruled over the diverse and ancient land of Egypt. Despite their Greek roots, Cleopatra and her family understood the importance of connecting with Egyptian culture and people, a connection that Cleopatra would deepen profoundly as she grew into her role as queen. From an early age, Cleopatra's life was marked by the fierce political rivalries within her own family. The Ptolemies were notorious for their inter-family marriages, as siblings often married to keep the bloodline pure and consolidate power. This practice, while stabilizing the dynasty's claim to the throne, also bred deep-seated rivalries among family members, with siblings often plotting against each other to secure their place in the line of succession. Cleopatra grew up amid these power struggles, and she witnessed firsthand how her father and siblings navigated the cutthroat politics of the royal court. This turbulent environment shaped her understanding of power, loyalty, and survival, setting the stage for the cunning and resilience she would later display as queen. The Egyptian and Greek cultural blend. Though Cleopatra was of Macedonian Greek descent, she uniquely embraced Egyptian culture in a way her ancestors had not. Most Ptolemaic rulers had clung to their Greek customs and language, ruling Egypt somewhat distantly as foreign monarchs. Cleopatra, however, saw the value in bridging this cultural gap. She learned to speak the Egyptian language, a rare choice among her Greek predecessors, who generally relied on Greek as the language of the royal court. This linguistic skill not only allowed her to connect more deeply with her Egyptian subjects but also set her apart as a leader who respected and valued the culture of the people she ruled. Beyond language, Cleopatra immersed herself in Egyptian religion, adopting the identity of the goddess Isis, a deity revered by the Egyptian people as a symbol of motherhood, magic, and protection. Identifying with Isis was both a personal and political choice, as it enabled Cleopatra to draw upon the devotion of her people and align herself with Egypt's sacred heritage. Cleopatra's ability to navigate and embody both Greek and Egyptian identities would become one of her greatest strengths, as it allowed her to rule as a legitimate Egyptian queen and diplomat in an era of increasing foreign threats. As a young girl, Cleopatra was also exposed to the Greek intellectual tradition, including philosophy, literature, science, and the arts. Alexandria, home to the legendary Library of Alexandria, was a center of learning, attracting scholars from all over the Mediterranean. Surrounded by this intellectual wealth, Cleopatra received an exceptional education for a woman of her time. She was tutored in rhetoric, mathematics, philosophy, astronomy, and natural sciences, developing a sharp intellect that would serve her well in her later diplomatic and political engagements. Historians have noted her linguistic skills. Cleopatra reportedly spoke multiple languages, including Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, Arabic, and possibly even Latin. Her education prepared her to engage with some of the most powerful men of her time on equal footing, distinguishing her as a formidable intellectual and ruler. Cleopatra's early struggles for power. When her father, Ptolemy XII, passed away in 51 BC, Cleopatra ascended to the throne, initially ruling alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was only 10 years old at the time. As was customary in Ptolemaic tradition, Cleopatra was expected to marry her brother to legitimize their rule. However, she quickly proved to be more than a mere co-ruler. Unlike her predecessors, who often relied on advisors and regents, Cleopatra displayed a keen desire to exercise power independently. She understood that Egypt, already weakened by her father's policies, needed a strong, central authority to restore its political stability and protect it from foreign encroachment. Cleopatra's early years as queen were marked by intense political challenges. Although she ruled as co-regent with her brother, tensions between them soon escalated, driven by advisors who sought to manipulate the young Ptolemy XIII and sideline Cleopatra. Recognizing that her position was threatened, Cleopatra took decisive action to consolidate her power. She began forging alliances within Egypt's military and administration, seeking to establish herself as the primary ruler in both name and authority. Her brother's advisors, however, were determined to oppose her and sought to undermine her influence, eventually leading to a civil war that would pit Cleopatra against her brother and his supporters. It was during this turbulent period that Cleopatra's political savvy and resourcefulness truly began to emerge. She understood that her brother's forces had the upper hand within Egypt, so she sought allies outside of her kingdom. Her first attempt to secure external support was bold and strategically calculated. She turned to none other than Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, who would prove instrumental in her ultimate consolidation of power. This alliance marked the beginning of Cleopatra's engagement with the Roman Empire, a relationship that would shape her reign and legacy. The Queen in the Making. As Cleopatra grew into her role as queen, she demonstrated a remarkable blend of ambition, intelligence, and pragmatism. Her willingness to take risks and make bold decisions, such as aligning with Caesar, revealed a young ruler unafraid to challenge conventions and push boundaries. Cleopatra's approach to power was informed by her unique position as a female ruler in a male-dominated world, a position that required her to be both diplomatic and, when necessary, ruthless. She learned early that trust could be a rare commodity in the royal court, and she was quick to recognize opportunities and threats, navigating them with an astuteness that belied her youth. Cleopatra's rise to power was not without sacrifices, and she faced the constant pressure of proving herself in a world where women rulers were often seen as temporary placeholders rather than legitimate sovereigns. Her journey was shaped by a constant balancing act. She had to be both fierce and compassionate, intelligent and cunning, Greek and Egyptian. Yet Cleopatra embraced this complexity, understanding that it was both her challenge and her greatest strength. By the time Cleopatra had fully assumed control over Egypt, she had already proven herself as a formidable ruler. Her early experiences in the royal court and her swift adaptation to the demands of the throne set the stage for her later achievements and alliances, as well as her complex relationships with Rome's most powerful men. As the lone queen in a world governed by kings and emperors, Cleopatra would rise to the challenge, becoming a leader whose impact would resonate across the centuries. Chapter 2: The Path to Power. Cleopatra's rise amidst family rivalries. The path to the throne was anything but smooth for Cleopatra. Though she had inherited her title through lineage, maintaining it required extraordinary cunning and resilience. Ptolemaic Egypt was a kingdom marked by intrigue and betrayal, and Cleopatra's family was no exception. She was born into an environment where alliances shifted rapidly, trust was fleeting, and survival often depended on eliminating rivals, even within one's own family. In this environment, Cleopatra developed an acute understanding of power dynamics, learning to maneuver through the intricacies of the Ptolemaic court with precision and calculation. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, had left Egypt in a precarious position when he died in 51 BC. He had struggled to maintain power, even being exiled at one point due to a rebellion by his own subjects. To regain his throne, he had relied on Roman support, a costly dependency that further burdened Egypt with debt to Rome. This debt would later serve as a backdrop for Cleopatra's own struggle to stabilize her rule and maintain Egypt's autonomy against the pressures of a powerful Roman Empire. Upon her father's death, Cleopatra became co-regent with her younger brother Ptolemy XIII. She was only 18 years old, yet she quickly proved more than capable of ruling. However, Ptolemaic custom dictated that Cleopatra marry her younger brother to legitimize her rule, a tradition that both symbolized and enforced a unique blend of unity and rivalry within the royal family. But Cleopatra's ambition and intelligence soon led her to seek greater control, a stance that put her at odds with the advisors and regents who held sway over her younger brother. These advisors, particularly the powerful courtier Pothinus, resented Cleopatra's assertiveness and independence, viewing her as a threat to their own influence over the young Ptolemy. The court became a battleground, with Cleopatra and her supporters on one side and her brother's advisors on the other. The tension finally erupted into open conflict when Pothinus and his faction succeeded in ousting Cleopatra from Alexandria. Forced into exile, Cleopatra retreated to Thebes, determined to reclaim her throne. During this period, she began building alliances among Egypt's military leaders and local governors, securing resources and loyalists who would support her in a civil war against her brother. It was a daring and dangerous strategy. Cleopatra knew that attempting to reclaim her throne by force would likely lead to confrontation with Ptolemy Xii's supporters, who controlled much of Alexandria. However, she also understood that reclaiming her throne would require more than Egyptian support. She needed the backing of a powerful ally, someone who could tip the scales in her favor. Thus, Cleopatra set her sights on the Roman Republic, an empire already entangled in Egypt's politics and debts. Her first goal, Julius Caesar. Enter Julius Caesar, a calculated alliance. Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria in 48 BCE under complex circumstances. Fresh from a civil war with Pompey, his rival, Caesar was seeking new allies and, importantly, financial resources to support his plans for Rome. Egypt, with its wealth and resources, was an attractive target, and Caesar's arrival in Alexandria presented a unique opportunity for Cleopatra. At this point, Ptolemy Xii's forces held the advantage, controlling the city and maintaining strong ties with the Roman forces loyal to Caesar. Cleopatra, exiled and vulnerable, needed a way to meet Caesar face to face, an audience that would allow her to present her case and secure his support. Legend has it that Cleopatra, unable to enter the palace undetected, arranged to be smuggled into Caesar's quarters rolled up in a carpet or, according to other accounts, a linen sack. Her dramatic entrance had the desired effect. Caesar, intrigued by her boldness and captivated by her charisma, agreed to support her claim to the throne. This alliance would prove to be one of the most critical and controversial of Cleopatra's life, intertwining her fate with that of Rome. Cleopatra understood that her appeal to Caesar could not be based solely on political need. She had to persuade him that backing her would serve his interests as well. She presented herself not only as a queen in exile but also as a ruler who could bring stability to Egypt, thus securing Rome's eastern frontier. Cleopatra's charm, intelligence, and confidence in Caesar's presence set her apart from her brother and his advisors, many of whom were more interested in maintaining their own positions than in ensuring Egypt's welfare. In aligning herself with Caesar, Cleopatra demonstrated her understanding of both Egyptian and Roman politics. She knew that Caesar, while powerful, was also under scrutiny by the Roman Senate and would need to justify his intervention in Egypt. By casting her alliance with Caesar as a necessary step toward stabilizing Egypt, she made herself indispensable to him and his cause. It was a strategic move that reflected Cleopatra's capacity to balance diplomacy and ambition, setting the stage for her return to power. Political maneuvering in Alexandria. Once Caesar declared his support for Cleopatra, a confrontation with Ptolemy Xii's forces became inevitable. Caesar's arrival in Egypt with a small army and Cleopatra's return to Alexandria ignited a civil war within the city. Cleopatra and Caesar's forces faced significant resistance, with Ptolemy's army heavily outnumbering Caesar's forces. This was a risky endeavor for Cleopatra, as she had thrown her lot entirely in with Caesar, whose success or failure would determine her fate. The civil war culminated in the siege of Alexandria, a brutal conflict that saw intense street fighting, the burning of parts of the city, and the eventual destruction of the fabled Library of Alexandria. Despite these challenges, Caesar and Cleopatra emerged victorious, defeating Ptolemy Xii's forces and solidifying Cleopatra's position on the throne. Ptolemy XIII reportedly drowned in the Nile while attempting to escape, leaving Cleopatra as the uncontested ruler of Egypt. Following this victory, Cleopatra solidified her reign by co-ruling with her youngest brother, Ptolemy XIV, though he was little more than a figurehead. Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar deepened, both politically and personally, as she bore him a son, C.Irmici, who she named Ptolemy XV. By positioning C.Irmici as a future ruler, Cleopatra sought to secure a dynastic link to Rome, creating a legacy that tied Egypt's fate to that of the Roman Republic. This period marked a high point in Cleopatra's reign. She had successfully reclaimed her throne and restored stability to her kingdom. Her alliance with Caesar provided Egypt with a measure of protection, allowing her to focus on strengthening her administration and re-establishing Egypt's wealth. Cleopatra's court became a vibrant center of political and cultural activity, attracting artists, philosophers, and diplomats from across the Mediterranean. She fostered an environment that celebrated both Egyptian and Greek traditions, blending cultures in a way that would become emblematic of her reign. The Queen's vision for Egypt. Cleopatra's time with Caesar allowed her to envision a prosperous, independent Egypt that could stand as a formidable power alongside Rome. Although Cleopatra admired Roman strength, she was fiercely protective of Egypt's sovereignty and sought to shield her kingdom from becoming a mere province under Roman rule. She invested in the kingdom's infrastructure, expanding trade networks and fostering economic growth. Cleopatra's ambition for Egypt was not only to preserve its independence but also to elevate it as a beacon of wealth, knowledge, and influence. Under Cleopatra's guidance, Egypt regained its economic footing. The Nile Delta, with its fertile lands, was a powerful asset, and Cleopatra encouraged agricultural productivity and trade, making Egypt a vital source of grain for the Mediterranean world. Her policies promoted trade routes that extended as far as India and Arabia, filling Alexandria's markets with exotic goods and luxuries that attracted merchants and traders from far and wide. Cleopatra's Egypt was not only a political power but also a cultural and commercial hub, rivaling even the greatest cities of the Roman Empire. Cleopatra's court became known for its opulence, reflecting her vision of Egypt as a wealthy and sophisticated kingdom. She embraced the grandeur of her role as both pharaoh and Hellenistic monarch, donning the ceremonial garb of Isis and presenting herself as a divine ruler. This dual identity allowed her to command respect from both Egyptian and Greek populations, fostering a unity that strengthened her reign. Cleopatra's rule was an era of renewal for Egypt, a period marked by intellectual and artistic growth that re-established Alexandria as one of the most influential cities of the ancient world. The unfolding of Cleopatra's power. By the end of this period, Cleopatra had firmly established herself as a queen who could command respect from both her subjects and powerful foreign leaders. She was no longer just a young queen fighting for survival. She had evolved into a ruler with a clear vision and an unwavering commitment to her people. Her alliance with Caesar had been a calculated risk that paid off, enabling her to transform Egypt into a kingdom that was both respected and feared. Yet Cleopatra's alliance with Caesar, while advantageous, would also tie her fate more deeply to Rome than she might have anticipated. Caesar's influence shielded Cleopatra, but it also left her vulnerable to the shifting tides of Roman politics. Her position depended on maintaining favor with Caesar and, by extension, with Rome, a dependency that would later bring both opportunities and great challenges. With Caesar as her ally, Cleopatra had successfully claimed her place on the throne. But as the next chapter will reveal, her journey was far from over. The Queen of Egypt would face new trials and forge new alliances as she sought to secure Egypt's future amid the tumultuous politics of Rome. Cleopatra's next great challenge would be her relationship with Mark Antony, another powerful Roman figure whose ambitions aligned with her own vision for an Egyptian resurgence. Chapter 3. The Alliance with Julius Caesar. First steps in Rome and Cleopatra's influence. Cleopatra's alliance with Julius Caesar was not only a strategic masterstroke but also a defining moment in her reign. While the alliance had secured her position in Egypt, it also introduced a complex relationship with the Roman Republic, a relationship that would profoundly influence both her personal life and political future. Caesar, at the height of his power, was an ambitious leader with an unquenchable thirst for control over Rome and its territories. Cleopatra, equally ambitious, saw in Caesar a partner who could help her realize her vision for Egypt, a strong, independent nation secure from Roman annexation. After their initial victory over Ptolemy XIII and the subsequent civil war, Caesar and Cleopatra grew closer, spending time together in Alexandria. Their relationship was more than political, it was also deeply personal. Cleopatra bore Caesar a son, Ptolemy XV Philopator Philometor Caesar, affectionately known as Caesarion or Little Caesar. With the birth of her son, Cleopatra strengthened her political position, linking the future of Egypt directly to the Roman leader's legacy. Caesarion represented Cleopatra's hope of binding Egypt's future to Rome without compromising her kingdom's autonomy, a vision of two powerful nations allied by blood and bound by mutual respect. In 46 BCE, Cleopatra traveled to Rome at Caesar's invitation, a bold and unprecedented move for an Egyptian monarch. She brought with her an impressive entourage, lavish gifts, and the grandeur of Alexandria's court. Her arrival sparked considerable intrigue and fascination within Roman society. Cleopatra's presence in Rome was a statement. She was not merely a subordinate ruler, she was a sovereign queen. Her arrival challenged the deeply entrenched Roman perception of women, especially foreign women, as secondary figures. Cleopatra, however, was no ordinary woman. She was a queen who commanded respect, intelligence, and influence. Love, politics, and power. Cleopatra and Caesar's relationship blurred the lines between personal affection and political alliance. While it's unclear whether Cleopatra was truly in love with Caesar or if her affection was part of her grand strategy, the bond they shared was undeniably complex and mutually beneficial. Caesar found in Cleopatra an astute, intellectual equal, a rarity in Roman society where women were seldom seen as political partners. Cleopatra, in turn, saw in Caesar a path to securing Egypt's independence, even as she navigated the risk of Rome's growing influence. Their time in Rome was marked by Cleopatra's keen political maneuvering. She hosted elaborate dinners, attended public events, and mingled with Rome's elite, sparking envy, admiration, and resentment among the Roman aristocracy. For many Romans, Cleopatra's presence was unsettling. She represented a foreign queen who had captured the attention of their most powerful leader, challenging their ideas of Roman superiority and gender roles. Her influence over Caesar was undeniable, and this influence made her a target of both fascination and suspicion among Roman politicians and citizens. Cleopatra's diplomatic skills shone during her time in Rome. She advocated for Egypt's interests and introduced Roman society to Egyptian customs, arts, and knowledge, elevating Egypt's cultural status among Rome's elite. Cleopatra's entourage included philosophers, astronomers, and artists who showcased Alexandria's intellectual achievements. She brought luxurious Egyptian goods to Rome, including perfumes, fine linens, and exotic spices, introducing Roman citizens to the splendors of the Nile. Through these acts, Cleopatra not only demonstrated her power but also subtly asserted Egypt's cultural significance, reminding Rome that Egypt was not merely a distant province but a sophisticated, wealthy civilization with much to offer. Yet despite Cleopatra's diplomatic achievements, her relationship with Caesar was controversial. Caesar had never formally recognized Caesarion as his son, a fact that complicated Cleopatra's position in Rome. Many senators and citizens viewed her as a disruptive force, a foreign queen with undue influence over their leader. Rome was deeply patriarchal, and Cleopatra's assertiveness and influence contradicted the traditional roles expected of women in Roman society. Her position as Caesar's lover, though unofficial, gave her a foothold in Roman politics, yet it also exposed her to scrutiny and resentment from those who viewed her as a threat to Rome's integrity. The Ides of March, a turning point. In 44 BCE, the relationship between Cleopatra and Caesar reached a turning point with Caesar's assassination on the Ides of March. On that fateful day, Caesar was attacked by a group of Roman senators who feared his growing power and ambition. Cleopatra's position became suddenly precarious. With Caesar gone, her primary ally and protector was no longer there to support her, and the political landscape in Rome shifted dramatically. Cleopatra, acutely aware of the dangers of staying in Rome, quickly made plans to return to Alexandria with Caesarion. Caesar's death unleashed chaos in Rome, dividing the Republic and sparking a power struggle that would ultimately lead to its transformation into an empire. Cleopatra, now a young mother and the reigning queen of Egypt, returned home to a kingdom that, though secure for the moment, was as vulnerable as ever to Roman ambition. She returned to Alexandria with a renewed determination to protect her son and safeguard Egypt's future. The path forward was uncertain, but Cleopatra's time in Rome had taught her valuable lessons about Roman politics, alliances, and the dangers of imperial ambition. Her experiences there would prepare her for the next chapter in her life, where she would again find herself entwined with one of Rome's most powerful leaders, Mark Antony. Cleopatra's return to Alexandria, regaining stability. Upon her return to Alexandria, Cleopatra faced the task of stabilizing her kingdom in the wake of Caesar's death. Although Caesar's assassination had temporarily disrupted Rome's hold over Egypt, Cleopatra understood that Rome's influence would soon reassert itself. The power struggle in Rome following Caesar's death was intense, with key figures like Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir, Mark Antony, and Lepidus vying for control of the Roman Republic. Cleopatra knew that Egypt's fate was still tied to Rome's power dynamics, and she prepared to navigate this new political landscape with the same determination and insight that had secured her throne years before. Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra focused on consolidating her rule and restoring Egypt's prosperity. She resumed her projects to boost the economy, enhance infrastructure, and promote the cultural achievements of her kingdom. Her court in Alexandria remained one of the most impressive in the ancient world, drawing scholars, artists, and diplomats from across the Mediterranean. Cleopatra's commitment to both Egyptian and Hellenistic traditions endeared her to her people, strengthening her legitimacy as a ruler who respected Egypt's rich heritage while embracing the advancements of the Greek world. Cleopatra also worked to secure Egypt's borders and maintain its independence in the face of potential threats from Rome. She invested in Egypt's military capabilities, particularly its navy, understanding that a strong defense was essential to resisting external pressures. The Nile, Egypt's lifeblood, continued to provide resources that sustained the kingdom's prosperity, allowing Cleopatra to maintain a degree of economic autonomy even as Rome's demands persisted. Cleopatra's strategic foresight enabled her to preserve Egypt's stability during this tumultuous period, ensuring that she could negotiate from a position of strength when the time came. Preparing for the next alliance, Mark Antony enters the scene. The power struggle in Rome eventually coalesced into a temporary truce with the formation of the Second Triumvirate, a political alliance between Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus, intended to restore order to the fractured republic. Mark Antony, a charismatic general and Caesar's trusted ally, emerged as one of the most powerful figures in Rome and soon found himself drawn to Egypt, where Cleopatra ruled with a blend of sophistication and resilience that mirrored his own ambitions. Antony, known for his tactical brilliance and formidable charisma, was intrigued by Cleopatra's reputation. He saw in her not only a beautiful queen but also a potential ally who could strengthen his position against his rival Octavian. Cleopatra, aware of the benefits of aligning with Antony, prepared to meet him with a combination of grandeur and diplomacy that showcased her strengths as both a ruler and a woman. When Cleopatra and Antony finally met, it was a meeting that would shape the course of history. Cleopatra famously arrived on a gilded barge, draped in finery, with a display of wealth and beauty that captivated Antony and reminded him of Egypt's prosperity. Their initial encounter was a spectacle that captured the imagination of both their contemporaries and later historians, signaling the beginning of one of the most famous alliances and romances in ancient history. Cleopatra recognized that aligning with Antony could secure Egypt's future and protect her son's position. Antony, in turn, saw Cleopatra's alliance as a means to strengthen his position against Octavian, leveraging Egypt's resources and military power. Together, Cleopatra and Antony would embark on a journey that blended personal passion with political strategy, seeking to reshape the balance of power in the ancient world. With Cleopatra now aligned with one of Rome's most influential figures, her ambitions for Egypt and her personal life would become even more intertwined with Rome's fate. This alliance would mark the beginning of a tumultuous period in her reign, leading her deeper into Roman politics and eventually to the dramatic conflict with Octavian. The stage was set for Cleopatra and Antony's dual pursuit of power, a pursuit that would both elevate and ultimately threaten them. Chapter 4: Ruler of Egypt. Cleopatra's reign and governance. With Julius Caesar's support gone and a new alliance forming with Mark Antony, Cleopatra solidified her position as the undisputed ruler of Egypt. Her reign, however, was not solely about political alliances or strategic marriages. Cleopatra had a vision for her kingdom. She was a shrewd and effective administrator, dedicated to both strengthening Egypt's independence and enhancing its prosperity. Unlike many rulers who focused primarily on maintaining their authority, Cleopatra devoted herself to the welfare of her people, implementing policies that stimulated Egypt's economy, bolstered its defenses, and secured its standing in the Mediterranean. Egypt's wealth was legendary, and Cleopatra was acutely aware of the need to manage its resources wisely. Under her rule, Egypt's trade flourished. The kingdom's abundant grain supplies, made possible by the fertile Nile Delta, were a critical resource not only for Egypt but also for neighboring nations, including Rome. Cleopatra leveraged Egypt's agricultural bounty to secure economic strength, ensuring that Egypt was a central player in the Mediterranean trade network. The bustling port of Alexandria served as the gateway for goods from Africa, Asia, and Europe, making it one of the most prosperous cities of its time. Cleopatra promoted infrastructure projects to support Egypt's economy, focusing on roads, temples, and harbors that facilitated trade and reinforced her connection with the Egyptian people. She invested in the modernization of Alexandria's port, ensuring it could accommodate larger vessels and improve the efficiency of Egypt's imports and exports. Her reign also saw improvements in Egypt's irrigation systems, which enabled farmers to maximize their yields, further strengthening the nation's agricultural output. Cleopatra's vision of a thriving Egypt was not merely aspirational. It was deeply rooted in practical measures that enhanced the kingdom's economic resilience. Despite the challenges of ruling in a time of political upheaval, Cleopatra's governance was marked by a blend of pragmatism and cultural pride. She balanced her Greek heritage with her deep respect for Egyptian customs, adopting Egyptian religious practices and presenting herself as a living goddess in the tradition of Isis. This identification with Isis, the goddess of fertility, motherhood, and magic, resonated with her subjects and reinforced her role as a protector and nurturer of Egypt. Cleopatra's decision to embody the goddess was both personal and political, as it bridged the cultural gap between her Macedonian lineage and the Egyptian people she ruled. Religious significance and connection to Isis. Cleopatra's role as pharaoh required her to navigate Egypt's complex religious landscape, where gods and goddesses were central to everyday life and political legitimacy. Her association with Isis was more than symbolic. It reinforced her position as a divine ruler, a concept deeply ingrained in Egyptian society. Isis was revered as a goddess of motherhood, magic, and protection, qualities that Cleopatra embraced as she governed her people. By aligning herself with this powerful figure, Cleopatra presented herself not only as a mortal queen but as a divine mother, protector, and ruler of Egypt, a strategy that resonated with both her Egyptian and Greek subjects. Cleopatra's identification with Isis was visible in her ceremonial attire and public appearances. She often appeared in traditional Egyptian dress, adorned with a sun disk and cow horns, the symbolic headdress of Isis. Through this association, Cleopatra reinforced her image as a mother to her people, a ruler who was both accessible and powerful. Her public embrace of Egyptian culture was a marked departure from the Ptolemaic kings who had ruled before her, most of whom had kept a distance from native customs. Cleopatra's deliberate engagement with Egyptian identity allowed her to consolidate power in a way that appealed to a diverse population. The cult of Isis had a strong following not only in Egypt but also in Rome and other parts of the Mediterranean. Cleopatra's association with the goddess extended her influence beyond Egypt's borders, contributing to her image as a powerful, almost mystical figure among foreigners. Roman citizens and elites, who viewed Egypt as an exotic land of wonder and wealth, were fascinated by Cleopatra's connection to Isis. Her divine status added an aura of mystery that amplified her political appeal and gave her an edge in diplomatic negotiations with foreign powers. This religious symbolism was a potent tool in Cleopatra's efforts to secure Egypt's sovereignty, reminding both her subjects and potential rivals of her strength and legitimacy. The Egyptian economy under Cleopatra. Cleopatra's economic policies were integral to her goal of a strong and independent Egypt. While her predecessors had often focused on maintaining wealth within the royal family, Cleopatra viewed economic stability as the foundation of her kingdom's strength. She took steps to ensure that Egypt's wealth benefited the broader society, fostering an environment in which trade, agriculture, and commerce could flourish. Cleopatra's reign brought prosperity to her kingdom, as she established trade routes that extended to distant regions, including Nubia, Arabia, and even India. Cleopatra's investments in Alexandria were particularly significant. The city was not only Egypt's capital but also a major hub of commerce, culture, and learning. Under Cleopatra's rule, Alexandria thrived as a center of wealth and intellectual achievement, drawing scholars, artists, and merchants from across the Mediterranean. Cleopatra understood that Alexandria's success as a commercial hub would reinforce Egypt's political clout, ensuring that her kingdom remained influential in both economic and cultural terms. One of Cleopatra's economic achievements was the expansion of Egypt's trade in luxury goods, including perfumes, linens, and precious metals. Cleopatra's control over the Nile, with its rich agricultural lands, allowed her to produce and export high-quality grain, which was essential not only to Egypt's economy but also to the Roman world. Cleopatra's trading policies were strategic. She offered Egyptian goods to foreign markets to reinforce Egypt's economic independence while controlling imports to ensure Egypt's wealth remained within its borders. This careful balance enabled her to maintain a stable economy even in the face of Rome's increasing demands. Military strength and the protection of Egypt. Cleopatra recognized that a secure Egypt required not only a strong economy but also a powerful military. Although the Nile provided natural protection, Cleopatra knew that Rome's ambitions and the political instability of the region made a capable military essential for safeguarding her kingdom. She invested heavily in Egypt's navy, aware that control of the Mediterranean was crucial to protecting her ports and trade routes from hostile forces. The Egyptian navy under Cleopatra's rule became one of the most formidable in the region. She commissioned a fleet of warships, well equipped with the latest technology, including ballistae, large crossbows, and other siege weapons. Cleopatra's focus on naval power was strategic. It allowed her to defend Egypt's borders effectively while projecting power into the eastern Mediterranean. Her navy served as both a deterrent against potential invaders and a means of securing Egypt's trade routes, reinforcing her kingdom's position as a formidable force in the ancient world. Cleopatra's emphasis on military preparedness extended to her recruitment of skilled officers and soldiers. She employed experienced Greek mercenaries and promoted native Egyptians within her army, fostering a sense of unity and loyalty. This diverse military force, loyal to her and well-equipped, enabled Cleopatra to defend Egypt against external threats, including Roman interference. Her commitment to a strong military not only protected Egypt's sovereignty but also gave Cleopatra leverage in her negotiations with Rome, as she could resist potential threats from the Republic's leaders. Diplomacy and Egypt's place in the Mediterranean. Cleopatra's diplomatic efforts were a critical aspect of her rule. As a ruler, she was not content to rely solely on Egypt's resources and military. She understood the importance of alliances in maintaining Egypt's independence. Cleopatra's ability to negotiate and build relationships with neighboring kingdoms and powerful leaders, including her partnership with Mark Antony, demonstrated her diplomatic acumen. Cleopatra's diplomacy extended beyond the Roman Republic to include other Mediterranean powers, such as the Nabateans and the Parthians. She sought to establish alliances that would counterbalance Rome's dominance, creating a network of allies who could support Egypt's sovereignty. By fostering these relationships, Cleopatra positioned herself as a central player in the region's geopolitics, reinforcing Egypt's status as a significant power. At home, Cleopatra promoted policies that encouraged a sense of unity among Egypt's diverse population. She embraced both Greek and Egyptian traditions, understanding that a stable kingdom required the support of both groups. Her efforts to bridge cultural divides fostered loyalty among her subjects, ensuring that Egypt remained united under her rule. Cleopatra's inclusivity and respect for Egypt's heritage earned her the admiration of her people, strengthening her legitimacy and consolidating her power. The challenges ahead. Cleopatra's success in governing Egypt brought a period of stability and prosperity, but she was well aware that her kingdom's security remained precarious. Rome's power continued to grow, and Cleopatra understood that her alliance with Mark Antony would be essential in protecting Egypt's independence. Her relationship with Antony was as much a political alliance as it was a personal one, driven by their shared ambition and mutual interests. Together, they would attempt to resist the encroachment of Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and one of the most powerful figures in Rome. With Egypt's economy thriving, its military strengthened, and its people united, Cleopatra was prepared for the challenges ahead. Her partnership with Antony would soon propel Egypt into a confrontation with Octavian, setting the stage for a struggle that would ultimately decide the fate of her kingdom. Cleopatra's reign had achieved remarkable stability and growth, but her journey was far from over. As she and Antony sought to establish a power base that could rival Rome, they would face trials that would test their resilience and ultimately lead them to a dramatic and fateful clash. Chapter 5. The Queen and the Roman Empire. Cleopatra's diplomacy and strategic marriages. Cleopatra's alliance with Mark Antony was not only a romantic relationship but also a powerful political strategy designed to secure Egypt's place in a rapidly changing world. After Caesar's death, Cleopatra had quickly understood that Rome's influence over Egypt would only intensify. To protect her kingdom from becoming a mere Roman province, Cleopatra needed a powerful ally within Rome itself. Mark Antony, a skilled military leader and one of Caesar's closest allies, emerged as a natural partner. Their relationship would intertwine personal ambition with the survival of Egypt, as Cleopatra and Antony navigated their shared goals and the looming threat of Octavian, Caesar's ambitious heir. When Cleopatra and Antony first met in 41 BCE, she understood the need to impress him both as a queen and as a potential ally. Their meeting, carefully orchestrated by Cleopatra, became legendary for its grandeur and theatricality. Cleopatra arrived on a lavish barge, adorned in the regalia of the goddess Isis, with the Nile glittering around her. Her entrance was a spectacle that captured Antony's imagination and communicated Egypt's wealth, power, and Cleopatra's own charisma. This first encounter was a masterclass in diplomacy, showcasing Cleopatra's ability to blend theatrical appeal with political strategy. Her message was clear: she was no ordinary ruler, and her alliance would be valuable to any Roman leader seeking support in the eastern Mediterranean. For Antony, Cleopatra represented both an alluring partner and a valuable ally. Rome was in the midst of a power struggle, with Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus vying for control under the Second Triumvirate. By aligning himself with Cleopatra, Antony could access Egypt's resources, including its vast wealth and powerful navy, strengthening his position against his rivals in Rome. Cleopatra's intelligence, sophistication, and ambition captivated Antony, and their alliance soon evolved into one of the most famous romances of the ancient world. However, their relationship was driven as much by mutual political interests as it was by personal affection. As their alliance solidified, Cleopatra and Antony established a mutually beneficial partnership. They had 3 children together: Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus. These children symbolized the merging of Egyptian and Roman power, a union that Cleopatra hoped would cement her family's dynasty and secure Egypt's independence. Through these children, Cleopatra and Antony embodied the fusion of East and West, a new era in which Egypt and Rome could coexist as allies rather than conqueror and subject. The Eastern Empire, Antony and Cleopatra's vision. Cleopatra and Antony shared a vision of an expansive Eastern Empire that would rival Rome's traditional power base in the West. Antony, as part of the Second Triumvirate, controlled Rome's eastern provinces, which provided him with a unique position from which to project power. Cleopatra saw in Antony's ambition an opportunity to establish a new order in which Egypt would remain sovereign, secure, and prosperous. Their vision was bold and unconventional, challenging Rome's authority and proposing a new balance of power that positioned Alexandria as a major center of influence. Together, Cleopatra and Antony embarked on a campaign to consolidate their control over the eastern Mediterranean. They invested in military campaigns, such as Antony's ill-fated campaign against Parthia, a powerful empire to the east of Rome. Although the Parthian campaign ended in failure, it underscored Antony's commitment to expanding his power and solidifying his position as a ruler capable of defending Roman interests in the East. Cleopatra supported Antony's ambitions, providing funds, soldiers, and resources to aid his campaign. This alliance deepened Cleopatra's influence in the region, allowing her to extend Egypt's reach and reinforcing her vision of a shared Eastern Empire. The donations of Alexandria, a political ceremony in 34 BCE, symbolized Antony and Cleopatra's shared ambitions. During this event, Antony distributed lands and titles to Cleopatra and their children, publicly recognizing them as rulers of various eastern territories. Cleopatra was declared Queen of Kings, and Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, was named King of Kings, an acknowledgement of his claim to both Egypt and Caesar's legacy. The donations of Alexandria marked a clear challenge to Octavian's authority in Rome, as Antony and Cleopatra effectively established a rival power structure. Cleopatra's position as Queen of Kings emphasized her unique status as a ruler who could command both Egyptian and Roman loyalties, creating a legacy that she hoped would endure through her children. Political influence beyond Egypt. Cleopatra's influence extended far beyond Egypt, as she skillfully navigated the complex web of alliances, rivalries, and power struggles that defined the Mediterranean. Her strategic intelligence allowed her to secure the loyalty of key territories, including Cyprus, Crete, and parts of Syria, which were crucial for maintaining Egypt's security and influence. Cleopatra's vision of an Egyptian-led empire reflected her ambition to transform Egypt from a regional power into a dominant force capable of standing alongside Rome. Cleopatra's political influence was bolstered by her command over Egypt's resources. She understood that her alliance with Antony hinged on Egypt's wealth, particularly its grain supplies, which were essential to sustaining Rome's population. By controlling the grain trade, Cleopatra exercised significant leverage over Rome's economic stability, ensuring that Egypt's resources were a powerful tool in her diplomatic arsenal. Cleopatra's control over these resources allowed her to negotiate from a position of strength, securing concessions and maintaining her kingdom's autonomy even as Rome's influence expanded. Cleopatra's diplomatic skills also enabled her to engage with other regional powers. She maintained relations with the Nabateans in Arabia and other eastern kingdoms, seeking to create a network of alliances that would bolster Egypt's security. Cleopatra's alliances were more than symbolic. They represented a pragmatic approach to diplomacy that reinforced Egypt's sovereignty and minimized the risk of foreign encroachment. Her diplomatic outreach demonstrated her understanding of the interconnectedness of the ancient world and her commitment to maintaining Egypt's independence in the face of Rome's expansionist ambitions. Tensions with Octavian and the rise of conflict. As Cleopatra and Antony pursued their shared vision, tensions with Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, reached a boiling point. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and Antony's rival, viewed Cleopatra's influence with suspicion, seeing her as a threat to Rome's stability and his own power. Octavian launched a propaganda campaign against Cleopatra, portraying her as a manipulative seductress who had corrupted Antony and sought to undermine Rome. His rhetoric cast Cleopatra as an outsider, a foreign queen who aimed to destabilize the Republic for her own gain. This narrative was effective, playing on Roman fears of Eastern influence and foreign rulers. Octavian's propaganda painted Cleopatra as a tyrant and accused her of plotting to rule Rome through Antony, a portrayal that resonated with the Roman public and Senate. Cleopatra, in Octavian's portrayal, became a symbol of decadence, luxury, and danger, qualities that contrasted sharply with Rome's idealized values of discipline and restraint. By framing Cleopatra as the enemy of Rome, Octavian was able to rally support for his eventual military campaign against her and Antony. Cleopatra's Eastern heritage, her identification with Isis, and her relationship with Antony became focal points in Octavian's campaign, emphasizing the cultural and political differences that separated them from Rome's traditional values. Cleopatra and Antony's relationship thus became a catalyst for war. Octavian's accusations were strategic. He positioned himself as Rome's defender against a foreign threat, building a case for military intervention that would culminate in the final confrontation between the Eastern and Western powers. Cleopatra, understanding the stakes, prepared for the possibility of conflict, mobilizing her navy and fortifying her defenses. She knew that a confrontation with Octavian was inevitable, but she remained resolute in her determination to protect Egypt's independence. The gathering storm, prelude to Actium. As tensions escalated, Cleopatra and Antony consolidated their forces in anticipation of a direct conflict with Octavian. Their base in Alexandria became a center of military planning and preparation as they gathered troops, supplies, and allies for the impending showdown. Cleopatra played an active role in these preparations, overseeing the organization of her navy and coordinating logistics to ensure that her forces were ready for battle. Her navy was among the most formidable in the Mediterranean, consisting of powerful warships equipped to defend Egypt's interests. The Battle of Actium, fought on September 2, 31 BCE, marked the climactic point in Cleopatra and Antony's struggle against Octavian. Antony's forces were significantly weakened, plagued by logistical issues, supply shortages, and defections. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, advised a naval engagement, believing that Egypt's strength on the sea could turn the tide in their favor. Actium would be a decisive battle, one that would determine the fate of Cleopatra, Antony, and the future of Egypt itself. However, the battle quickly turned against them. Octavian's forces, under the command of his trusted general Agrippa, outmaneuvered Antony and Cleopatra's navy. The battle was a chaotic and brutal engagement, with ships colliding, soldiers battling aboard burning vessels, and the tides shifting under the weight of their struggle. Cleopatra, witnessing the defeat of her fleet, made a fateful decision to retreat, fleeing back to Alexandria with her remaining ships. Antony, demoralized and betrayed by some of his own commanders, soon followed, leaving Octavian's forces victorious. The defeat at Actium was a devastating blow to Cleopatra and Antony's ambitions. It marked the end of their vision for a powerful Eastern empire and signaled the beginning of Egypt's descent into Roman hands. Cleopatra returned to Alexandria, where she prepared for the final confrontation with Octavian, determined to protect her kingdom's sovereignty even as the odds grew increasingly bleak. The aftermath: Cleopatra's resilience. Though defeated, Cleopatra remained resilient. Her kingdom had suffered a blow, yet she continued to govern and strengthen Alexandria in preparation for Octavian's approach. Cleopatra understood that her fate and Egypt's future now lay in her ability to negotiate with Octavian, to whom she sent ambassadors in a final attempt to secure her children's rights and Egypt's independence. Cleopatra's diplomatic skills, honed over years of political maneuvering, were now tested to their limits as she sought to preserve whatever remnants of her dynasty she could. Despite the loss at Actium, Cleopatra's legacy as a ruler who valued her people and fought for her kingdom's sovereignty remained intact. Her alliance with Antony, though it had led to war, also highlighted her commitment to securing Egypt's future in a world dominated by Rome. As Octavian's forces closed in on Alexandria, Cleopatra faced the end of her reign with courage, aware that her actions would define her legacy and shape the history of Egypt. The end was near, but Cleopatra's story was not over. She would continue to fight for her kingdom's independence until the very last moment, her resilience and determination echoing across the ages. The world would soon witness the final chapter of Cleopatra's life, a chapter marked by sacrifice, defiance, and the undying spirit of a queen who had ruled with intelligence, grace, and power. Chapter 6: The Alliance with Mark Antony. Building an empire together. The partnership between Cleopatra and Mark Antony was unlike any other alliance of its time, blending personal affection with strategic ambition. Their shared vision of a powerful Eastern empire that could rival Rome was as daring as it was dangerous, challenging the traditional power structure of the Roman Republic. Together, Cleopatra and Antony pursued their goals with relentless determination, working to expand their influence across the Mediterranean and establish a legacy that would endure. For Cleopatra, this alliance offered a path to secure Egypt's independence and future, while Antony saw in it an opportunity to solidify his power and rival his Roman adversaries, particularly Octavian. Antony and Cleopatra's bond strengthened after their first meeting in Tarsus in 41 BCE, where Cleopatra's grand arrival aboard a golden barge enchanted Antony. Cleopatra understood the importance of impressing Antony, not only as a potential ally but as a man who could be captivated by Egypt's wealth and mystique. She dazzled him with her intelligence, charm, and lavish displays of wealth, positioning herself as a queen of unmatched allure and authority. Their mutual attraction quickly evolved into a strategic partnership, and Antony, captivated by Cleopatra, returned with her to Alexandria, where their partnership would flourish. In Alexandria, Cleopatra and Antony embraced their roles as co-rulers and partners, blending their ambitions into a single, shared vision. Antony's time in Alexandria marked a period of indulgence and grandeur, as he immersed himself in Egypt's culture and traditions, allowing Cleopatra's influence to guide him. They spent their days surrounded by luxury, hosting feasts, festivals, and celebrations that emphasized the wealth and sophistication of Alexandria. This period was known as the inimitable livers phase, a time of extravagance and cultural exchange, during which Antony adopted elements of Egyptian culture, further blurring the lines between Roman and Egyptian identity. The political foundation of their alliance. At the heart of Cleopatra and Antony's partnership was a political calculation that blended their mutual interests. Antony, as one of the members of the Second Triumvirate, held significant authority over Rome's eastern provinces, including Syria and parts of Asia Minor. This control offered him the resources and manpower needed to challenge Octavian's influence in the West. Cleopatra, as Egypt's sovereign, commanded vast resources and wealth, particularly the agricultural bounty of the Nile Delta, which was crucial for Rome's grain supply. Their union represented a merging of resources and influence that could rival Rome's power and secure both of their futures. Cleopatra recognized that her alliance with Antony provided an opportunity to expand Egypt's borders and strengthen her position in the region. Antony granted Cleopatra territories that extended Egypt's reach, including Cyprus, parts of Crete, Cyrene, modern-day Libya, and portions of Syria. These territories not only reinforced Egypt's geopolitical standing but also reflected Cleopatra's influence over Antony, who was willing to empower her as a ruler in her own right. Cleopatra's ability to secure these lands showcased her diplomatic acumen and underscored her commitment to Egypt's growth as a sovereign power. For Antony, this alliance was also a means of legitimizing his authority in the East. Rome was in turmoil, divided between those who supported the traditional republican structure and those who desired a more centralized power under a single ruler. Antony's bond with Cleopatra allowed him to consolidate his power base in the East, creating a network of loyal territories that could support him in his struggle against Octavian. Together, Cleopatra and Antony envisioned a realm that united Egypt's wealth with Rome's military strength, a dual empire that could challenge Octavian's influence and secure their legacies. The donations of Alexandria, declaring a new order. In 34 BCE, Cleopatra and Antony publicly celebrated their ambitions in a grand ceremony known as the Donations of Alexandria. This event, held in Alexandria's magnificent gymnasium, symbolized their vision for a shared empire and emphasized their authority as rulers of both Egypt and the eastern provinces. During the ceremony, Antony and Cleopatra dressed in royal garb, with Cleopatra adorned as Isis and Antony as the god Dionysus. They sat on golden thrones alongside their children, who were each bestowed with symbolic titles and territories, signifying their roles in the future of Cleopatra and Antony's envisioned empire. Cleopatra's eldest son, C.Irmici, was declared King of Kings and recognized as the legitimate son of Julius Caesar, asserting his claim to both Egypt and Rome. Antony also awarded territories to his children with Cleopatra. Alexander Helios was given Armenia and Parthia, Cleopatra Selene received Cyrene and Crete, and the youngest, Ptolemy Philadelphus, was awarded Phoenicia and parts of Syria. This public recognition of their children as rulers was unprecedented, directly challenging Octavian's authority and positioning Cleopatra and Antony as founders of a dynastic order that rivaled Rome's power. The donations of Alexandria were as much a statement to Rome as they were to Egypt. Cleopatra and Antony's declaration of a new political structure was a clear challenge to Octavian, who viewed their ambitions as a threat to his own claim to power. The ceremony underscored their intention to create a legacy that would outlast them, with their children positioned as future rulers of a united empire. This event was a bold assertion of their vision and a symbol of their defiance against Rome's traditional authority. The War of Propaganda, Octavian's campaign against Cleopatra. In Rome, Octavian watched the rise of Cleopatra and Antony's influence with growing unease. Their partnership represented a direct threat to his own ambitions, and he launched a propaganda campaign to undermine Cleopatra's influence and turn public opinion against them. Octavian portrayed Cleopatra as a foreign queen who had bewitched Antony, accusing her of corrupting him and luring him away from his Roman duties. Through speeches, poems, and rumors, Octavian crafted an image of Cleopatra as a dangerous seductress, a woman whose ambitions were a threat to Rome itself. Octavian's propaganda painted Cleopatra as an enemy of Rome, a figure of excess and decadence who sought to impose her Eastern customs on the Roman people. This portrayal played on the Roman populace's fears of foreign influence and reinforced existing stereotypes about the decadent East. Octavian emphasized Cleopatra's identification with Isis, depicting her as a foreign goddess who had ensnared Antony in her web. By vilifying Cleopatra, Octavian positioned himself as a defender of Roman values and rallied support for a military campaign to liberate Rome from her influence. The propaganda war proved effective, turning public sentiment in Rome against Antony and Cleopatra. Octavian's accusations gained traction, as many Romans viewed Cleopatra's ambitions with suspicion and feared the potential rise of an Eastern dynasty. Octavian's campaign successfully cast the conflict not as a civil war but as a struggle to preserve Rome's integrity against a foreign queen. By framing Cleopatra as the primary antagonist, Octavian gained the Senate's support and prepared for a full-scale military confrontation against her and Antony. The Battle of Actium, the fateful clash. The growing tensions between Octavian and Antony reached their climax at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Antony and Cleopatra assembled their forces, including a vast fleet of Egyptian and Roman ships, to confront Octavian's navy, commanded by his trusted general, Agrippa. The stakes were immense. This battle would determine the future of Rome, Egypt, and the ambitions that Antony and Cleopatra had nurtured together. Cleopatra played a crucial role in the preparations, overseeing the organization of her navy and coordinating logistics, determined to defend her vision of an independent, sovereign Egypt. The Battle of Actium was a complex and grueling engagement, fought off the coast of Greece. Cleopatra and Antony's forces initially held their ground, but Octavian's fleet proved more disciplined and tactically superior. Agrippa's tactics gradually outmaneuvered Antony's forces, creating a sense of chaos and desperation among Cleopatra's and Antony's ranks. Cleopatra, recognizing the futility of continuing the battle, made a fateful decision to retreat with her fleet, hoping to preserve as much of her navy as possible and regroup in Alexandria. Antony, witnessing Cleopatra's retreat, followed her back to Alexandria, abandoning the battle and leaving Octavian victorious. The defeat at Actium shattered Antony and Cleopatra's ambitions and marked the beginning of the end for both their empire and their dreams. The loss of Actium was not only a military defeat but also a symbolic one, representing the collapse of their vision and the final triumph of Octavian's propaganda. The retreat to Alexandria foreshadowed their inevitable downfall, as Octavian prepared to launch a final assault on Egypt. The return to Alexandria, a city preparing for the end. Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra and Antony faced the grim reality of their situation. They were now isolated, with few allies remaining and Rome's forces closing in. Despite their defeat, Cleopatra maintained her resilience, continuing to govern Alexandria and preparing her defenses against Octavian's impending invasion. The once grand city became a fortress, filled with soldiers and stockpiles of supplies, as Cleopatra sought to hold off Octavian's forces for as long as possible. Cleopatra's final months in Alexandria were marked by a mixture of defiance and despair. She negotiated with Octavian, attempting to secure a future for her children and preserve Egypt's sovereignty, but Octavian was unmoved. Cleopatra's attempts to protect her family reflected her enduring commitment to her dynasty, even as her own fate became increasingly uncertain. Antony, broken by the loss at Actium and haunted by his abandonment of his forces, struggled with his own despair, oscillating between moments of courage and despair. In these final days, Cleopatra prepared for what she knew would be the end of her reign and possibly her life. She made arrangements for her wealth and treasures, intending to protect Egypt's cultural and economic heritage even as Octavian's forces advanced. Cleopatra's resilience in these final moments underscored her unwavering dedication to her kingdom, her children, and her legacy, even as she faced the inevitable collapse of the world she had fought to build. The tragic conclusion of a shared dream. The alliance between Cleopatra and Antony, once filled with promise and vision, ended in tragedy. Their shared ambition had led them to challenge Rome, but their dream of an Eastern empire ultimately fell before Octavian's might. Cleopatra's loyalty to her people and her partnership with Antony demonstrated her strength as a ruler who had strived to protect Egypt's independence in an era dominated by Roman expansion. The love story of Cleopatra and Antony became immortalized as a tale of passion, ambition, and sacrifice. Together, they had dared to envision a new order, a fusion of Eastern and Western power that could rival Rome. Though their vision did not endure, Cleopatra's determination and courage in her final days would forever mark her as one of history's most remarkable figures. She had ruled Egypt with a fierce dedication, defended her people with all her strength, and left a legacy that would resonate through the ages. Chapter 7: War and Conflict. The Battle of Actium, the Clash of Empires. The Battle of Actium, fought on September 2, 31 BC, stands as one of the most decisive conflicts in ancient history, marking the end of Cleopatra and Mark Antony's aspirations for a new order. For Cleopatra, Actium represented a final stand for Egypt's sovereignty. She understood that victory would secure her kingdom's independence, while defeat would mean subjugation under Roman control. Alongside Antony, she had assembled one of the largest fleets in the Mediterranean, a formidable force intended to challenge Octavian's authority and defend Egypt's right to self-rule. The battle took place near the coast of western Greece, where Antony and Cleopatra's combined forces clashed with Octavian's navy, commanded by Agrippa. Agrippa, a highly skilled naval strategist, carefully planned his maneuvers to exploit Antony's weaker tactical position. Octavian's forces were smaller but well-organized, and Agrippa used his naval expertise to cut off Antony's supply lines and encircle his fleet. Cleopatra, recognizing the precarious nature of the battle, coordinated with Antony to keep their forces together and focused on a strategic withdrawal if defeat seemed inevitable. As the battle wore on, it became clear that Antony's forces were struggling to maintain cohesion. Agrippa's tactics had succeeded in creating a blockade, trapping Cleopatra and Antony's fleet. Antony's forces, suffering from supply shortages and internal discord, began to falter under the relentless pressure from Octavian's navy. Cleopatra, seeing the imminent risk of annihilation, made a fateful decision. She ordered her flagship and a portion of her navy to break away from the battle and return to Alexandria. This choice, though strategic, left Antony's forces in disarray, as many of his men, confused and demoralized, either surrendered or attempted to follow Cleopatra's retreat. Antony, devastated by the turn of events, attempted to pursue Cleopatra back to Alexandria. His decision to leave the battlefield effectively ended any remaining hopes of victory, sealing his and Cleopatra's fate. The loss at Actium shattered their ambitions and handed Octavian a decisive victory, marking the beginning of the end for Egypt's independence and Cleopatra's reign. Octavian's triumph at Actium elevated him as the sole power in Rome, clearing the way for him to transform the Roman Republic into an empire under his control. The retreat to Alexandria. Cleopatra's return to Alexandria was a somber one. She had left Actium with her remaining ships intact, but the defeat weighed heavily on her and her people. The grand vision of an independent Eastern empire had crumbled, leaving Cleopatra isolated and Egypt vulnerable to Roman dominance. Despite this setback, Cleopatra's resolve did not falter. She returned to Alexandria determined to fortify her city and protect her people from Octavian's inevitable advance. She continued to govern her kingdom with the same dedication and strength that had defined her reign, even as her options dwindled. In Alexandria, Cleopatra oversaw the reinforcement of the city's defenses, preparing her people for the possibility of a Roman invasion. Her leadership in these final days was marked by resilience and pragmatism, as she sought to secure Egypt's resources and maintain stability in the face of impending crisis. She reached out to her remaining allies in the Mediterranean, though few were willing to challenge Octavian's supremacy. Cleopatra's final days in Alexandria were filled with preparation and diplomacy, as she attempted to negotiate with Octavian and preserve her dynasty's future. Despite their defeat, Cleopatra and Antony maintained a semblance of authority in Alexandria. They continued to hold court, surrounded by loyal supporters who remained steadfast in their loyalty to the queen. Cleopatra's enduring influence among her people and court was a testament to her strength as a leader who had ruled with intelligence, compassion, and courage. She knew that her legacy and Egypt's future depended on her ability to negotiate with Octavian, and she was determined to approach him from a position of strength even as her power waned. The Siege of Alexandria, the final stand. By the summer of 30 BCE, Octavian's forces had reached the outskirts of Alexandria, signaling the beginning of the end for Cleopatra's reign. Octavian's campaign was swift and merciless, as he aimed to bring Egypt under Roman control and eliminate any remaining resistance. The Siege of Alexandria was both a military and psychological assault, designed to break Cleopatra's resolve and force her surrender. Despite her limited resources, Cleopatra prepared to defend her city, rallying her soldiers and inspiring loyalty among her subjects. The siege was brutal, with Octavian's forces cutting off Alexandria's access to supplies and isolating the city from potential reinforcements. Cleopatra's people, already weary from years of political instability and war, faced starvation and hardship as the siege wore on. Yet Cleopatra remained resilient, refusing to submit to Octavian's demands and holding fast to the hope that she could negotiate a favorable outcome for her family and her kingdom. Antony, however, was struggling. The defeat at Actium had broken his spirit, and he oscillated between moments of bravery and despair. Reports from this period suggest that Antony attempted to rally his remaining troops, but his forces were too few to withstand Octavian's superior army. Cleopatra, meanwhile, continued to explore every possible avenue for negotiation, even sending emissaries to Octavian with offers to surrender on terms that would protect her children's inheritance. But Octavian, determined to bring Egypt fully under Roman control, was unwilling to grant Cleopatra the concessions she sought. As Octavian's forces closed in on the city, Cleopatra and Antony prepared for the inevitable. Antony, devastated by the hopelessness of their situation, ultimately took his own life, a tragic end for a once great general who had stood at the pinnacle of Roman power. Cleopatra, upon learning of Antony's death, mourned his passing deeply, understanding that her last ally and partner in this struggle was gone. Despite the sorrow, Cleopatra resolved to face her own fate with courage, knowing that her actions in these final moments would define her legacy. Cleopatra's final act of defiance. With Antony gone and Octavian's forces occupying Alexandria, Cleopatra faced a grim reality. Octavian, now the unchallenged ruler of Rome, intended to bring her back to Rome as a war prize, parading her through the streets in a triumph that would mark the final subjugation of Egypt. Cleopatra, however, was determined to avoid such a humiliating fate. She understood that her death would preserve her dignity and prevent Octavian from using her as a symbol of Rome's supremacy over Egypt. In her final act of defiance, Cleopatra took her own life, likely through the bite of an asp, according to legend. Her death was a powerful statement, a refusal to be reduced to a mere captive and a final assertion of her autonomy as a queen. Cleopatra's suicide marked the end of Egypt's last pharaonic dynasty and the beginning of Egypt's transformation into a Roman province. Her death symbolized the passing of an era, as the Roman Empire absorbed Egypt, stripping it of its independence and integrating its wealth into the vast machinery of Rome. Cleopatra's death sent shockwaves throughout the ancient world. Octavian, though victorious, had been denied the triumph he had sought. Cleopatra's choice to end her life on her own terms frustrated his desire to showcase her as a symbol of his conquest, and her final act became a legend of defiance and dignity. Cleopatra's legacy endured, as her story inspired both admiration and fascination, cementing her place in history as one of the most remarkable women of the ancient world. The legacy of war and Cleopatra's enduring influence. The aftermath of Cleopatra's death marked a pivotal turning point for both Egypt and Rome. Egypt, once a sovereign kingdom with a rich cultural heritage, was reduced to a Roman province, its resources now feeding the ambitions of Rome's emperors. Octavian, now known as Augustus, became the first emperor of Rome, marking the end of the Roman Republic and the dawn of the Roman Empire. Cleopatra's defeat and Egypt's annexation into the empire symbolized the shift of power from the east to the west, a transformation that would shape the course of history for centuries. Though Cleopatra's political ambitions were thwarted, her influence endured. She became a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and independence, remembered as a queen who had defied the odds and stood against one of the most powerful empires in history. Cleopatra's legacy lives on as an icon of strength, her story celebrated as one of love, ambition, and defiance in the face of overwhelming adversity. Her life continues to captivate historians, writers, and artists who see in her story the timeless themes of courage and resilience. Cleopatra's defeat may have ended Egypt's independence, but her impact on history remains profound. As the last pharaoh of Egypt, she represented the end of an ancient civilization and the beginning of a new imperial order. Cleopatra's determination to protect her people and her defiance against Rome's authority have immortalized her as a powerful and complex figure, a woman who challenged the norms of her time and left an indelible mark on the world. Chapter 8. The Fall of Alexandria. Antony's defeat and Cleopatra's desperation. The fall of Alexandria was a tragic and inevitable conclusion to the long struggle between Cleopatra and the Roman Republic. Following the catastrophic defeat at Actium, Cleopatra and Antony returned to Alexandria, knowing their hopes of creating an Eastern empire were now shattered. This loss had not only weakened their military standing but had also eroded the morale and loyalty of many who had once supported them. Antony, grappling with the humiliation of defeat and the collapse of his ambitions, found himself consumed by despair, while Cleopatra remained resolute in her determination to defend her kingdom, even as her options narrowed. As Octavian's forces advanced towards Alexandria, Cleopatra worked tirelessly to reinforce the city's defenses, aware that Egypt's last stand was near. She initiated preparations for a potential siege, stockpiling resources and fortifying Alexandria's strategic points. Her efforts reflected both her resilience and a deep commitment to her people, as she sought to protect Egypt's independence even when the odds were against her. Despite the looming threat, Cleopatra continued to rule Alexandria with the same pride and dedication that had defined her reign, seeking ways to negotiate with Octavian and preserve her family's legacy. Meanwhile, Antony's mental state deteriorated. Once a celebrated general and ally of Caesar, Antony had become a man haunted by the weight of his choices and failures. While he attempted to rally his forces and prepare for the impending conflict, his confidence had waned. His personal struggle reflected the broader crisis facing Cleopatra's kingdom, a once mighty alliance brought to its knees by the inexorable advance of Octavian's forces. Cleopatra's support for Antony was unwavering, yet she must have understood that the man who had once shared her ambitions was now a shadow of his former self, broken by the realization of their impending defeat. In an attempt to avoid complete subjugation, Cleopatra sent emissaries to Octavian, offering him wealth and resources in exchange for sparing her children and possibly allowing them to retain some form of authority within Egypt. She hoped to secure their future and safeguard the legacy of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Octavian, however, was unmoved by these offers. He had no intention of leaving Egypt independent or allowing any heirs of Cleopatra to challenge his authority. His ambition was clear: the complete absorption of Egypt into the Roman Empire and the final eradication of Cleopatra's power. The Siege of Alexandria, the last stand. By the summer of 30 BCE, Octavian's forces surrounded Alexandria. Cleopatra's beloved city, which had been a symbol of knowledge, wealth, and cultural splendor, now faced the onslaught of Roman forces determined to bring it under their control. The siege was brutal, as Octavian's forces cut off Alexandria's access to supplies, isolating the city from potential reinforcements and creating an atmosphere of fear and despair among its inhabitants. Cleopatra, aware that surrender was not an option if she wished to preserve her dignity and her legacy, continued to rally her people, encouraging them to resist for as long as possible. The city's defenders, though fiercely loyal to Cleopatra, were ill-equipped to face Octavian's seasoned troops. Cleopatra's navy had been devastated at Actium, and her remaining forces were vastly outnumbered. Despite these limitations, Cleopatra's resilience inspired her soldiers, who fought valiantly to protect Alexandria from the advancing Roman forces. The streets of Alexandria became battlefields, with Egyptian soldiers clashing with Roman legions in a desperate struggle to prevent Octavian's forces from breaching the city walls. As the siege wore on, Alexandria's resources began to dwindle. Starvation and exhaustion took their toll on Cleopatra's people, and the once bustling city began to resemble a ghost town, its vibrant streets now filled with the echoes of conflict and loss. Cleopatra's royal palace became a final bastion of resistance, where she and her remaining supporters held out against Octavian's inevitable assault. Despite the grim circumstances, Cleopatra's presence served as a source of hope for those who remained loyal to her, embodying the courage and dignity that had characterized her reign. Inside the palace, Cleopatra continued to hold court, surrounded by her loyal advisors and supporters. She maintained the rituals and traditions of her position, refusing to let the fear of defeat diminish her authority as queen. Cleopatra's determination to uphold her role as Egypt's sovereign, even as her kingdom crumbled around her, underscored her unyielding dedication to her people and her legacy. This final stand, though ultimately doomed, was a testament to Cleopatra's strength and resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. The death of Antony, a tragic farewell. In the midst of the siege, Antony, despairing and overwhelmed by the collapse of their shared ambitions, took his own life. According to historical accounts, Antony was led to believe that Cleopatra had already died, and in a moment of profound grief, he chose to end his life rather than face capture by Octavian. Mortally wounded, Antony was brought to Cleopatra, who had him carried to her private quarters within the palace. The scene was one of profound sorrow, as Cleopatra held the dying Antony in her arms, mourning the loss of the man with whom she had shared both triumphs and tragedies. Antony's death marked the end of their alliance and the final collapse of their dream of an independent Eastern empire. Cleopatra, devastated by Antony's passing, must have felt the full weight of her impending fate. She now stood alone against Octavian, with no remaining allies and no possibility of escape. Yet even in her grief, Cleopatra's resolve remained unbroken. She understood that her legacy, and the future of her children, depended on how she chose to confront her final days. Antony's death was a turning point for Cleopatra, who now recognized that her only remaining option was to negotiate directly with Octavian. She sent emissaries to him once more, seeking terms that would ensure the safety of her children. Cleopatra's primary concern was Caesarion, her son by Julius Caesar, whom she hoped could retain a claim to the throne or at least escape Octavian's wrath. However, Octavian had no intention of sparing Caesarion or any of her heirs, viewing them as potential threats to his authority. Cleopatra's hopes for a peaceful resolution were dashed, leaving her with a difficult decision: surrender and submit to humiliation, or end her life on her own terms. The final days of Cleopatra. In the days that followed Antony's death, Cleopatra's situation grew increasingly dire. Octavian's forces had entered Alexandria, and the Roman leader himself prepared to take Cleopatra captive. He planned to parade her through Rome as a symbol of his triumph, showcasing her as the defeated enemy of Rome. Cleopatra, understanding the humiliation that awaited her, resolved to avoid such a fate. She prepared herself for her final act, determined to leave the world on her own terms and preserve her dignity as Egypt's last queen. Cleopatra's final preparations were meticulous. According to historical accounts, she arranged for her most prized possessions to be hidden or destroyed, preventing them from falling into Roman hands. She spent time with her children, ensuring that they understood her legacy and their heritage, and instructed her servants to prepare for her death. Cleopatra's actions in these final days reflected her awareness of the importance of her legacy. She was determined to be remembered not as a prisoner but as a proud and independent ruler who had resisted Rome until the very end. Legend holds that Cleopatra took her life with the bite of an asp, a venomous snake that symbolized divine royalty in Egyptian culture. Whether through the asp or by another means, Cleopatra's death was a powerful and deliberate act, a final defiance against Octavian's plans to humiliate her. By choosing death, Cleopatra denied Octavian the satisfaction of parading her as a trophy of his conquest. Her suicide was a statement of autonomy, a last assertion of her identity as Egypt's sovereign and a refusal to be reduced to a mere symbol of Rome's victory. The consequences of Alexandria's fall. With Cleopatra's death, Egypt's independence came to an end. Octavian seized Alexandria and declared Egypt a Roman province, absorbing its wealth and resources into the empire. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, was extinguished, marking the close of an era in both Egyptian and Mediterranean history. Alexandria, once a beacon of learning, culture, and wealth, now became a jewel in Rome's empire, its treasures and knowledge contributing to Rome's legacy rather than its own. The aftermath of Alexandria's fall was transformative for Rome. Octavian, now undisputed as the most powerful man in the Roman world, returned to Rome and celebrated a grand triumph, marking the end of the Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. Taking on the title of Augustus, he became Rome's first emperor, establishing a legacy that would define Western civilization for centuries. Cleopatra's defeat marked the end of an ancient civilization's sovereignty, as Egypt's cultural and political heritage was absorbed and reinterpreted within the framework of the Roman Empire. For Cleopatra's children, the future was grim. Caesar Ion, her eldest son and heir, was captured and executed on Octavian's orders, eliminating any potential threat to his rule. Cleopatra's surviving children by Antony, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus were taken to Rome and eventually raised in the household of Octavia, Antony's former wife and Octavian's sister. Although they were spared, they lived in relative obscurity, with little influence over the course of history. Cleopatra's dream of a dynasty that would rule over Egypt and Rome was extinguished, leaving only her memory and legacy. Alexandria's legacy and Cleopatra's enduring influence. The fall of Alexandria and the death of Cleopatra left an indelible mark on history. Cleopatra's life and reign became the stuff of legend, her story retold across generations as a tale of love, ambition, and defiance. Her intelligence, courage, and determination to protect her kingdom against overwhelming odds have immortalized her as one of the ancient world's most iconic figures. Cleopatra's legacy endures, inspiring countless works of literature, art, and film, each retelling capturing the enduring fascination with her life and the choices she made in her final days. Alexandria, too, retained its cultural significance, even as a province of Rome. The city remained a center of learning, science, and philosophy, attracting scholars from across the Roman Empire. Although it was no longer the capital of an independent Egypt, Alexandria continued to embody the spirit of Cleopatra's legacy, serving as a reminder of the richness of Egyptian culture and the resilience of its people. Cleopatra's story, and the story of Alexandria, remains a testament to the enduring power of ambition, intellect, and defiance in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. Cleopatra's life may have ended with the fall of Alexandria, but her influence would echo throughout history. Her defiance against Rome's dominance, her efforts to secure Egypt's sovereignty, and her commitment to her people remain powerful symbols of resistance. Cleopatra's reign marked the end of an era, but her legacy as one of history's most formidable rulers continues to inspire and captivate, reminding the world of a queen who dared to challenge an empire. Chapter 9. The Final Days of Cleopatra. Her Captivity and the Fatal Decision. The final days of Cleopatra's life were marked by a mixture of determination, sorrow, and a resolve to control her own fate. Following the fall of Alexandria and the suicide of Mark Antony, Cleopatra was left alone to face the wrath of Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus. Octavian was a ruthless victor who saw Cleopatra not only as the last obstacle to complete Roman control over Egypt but also as a potential trophy to parade through Rome, symbolizing his triumph over the Eastern threat she had come to represent. Cleopatra, however, had no intention of becoming a captive spectacle. After Antony's death, Cleopatra attempted to negotiate with Octavian, hoping to secure some measure of protection for her children and perhaps a dignified future for herself. Octavian, while outwardly polite, was calculating and unyielding in his intent to absorb Egypt fully into Rome and eliminate any remnants of the Ptolemaic dynasty's power. Cleopatra quickly understood that her hopes of negotiating a peaceful outcome were futile. Octavian was determined to use her as a symbol of his complete conquest of Egypt, reducing her to a conquered queen rather than a respected ruler. While Octavian's emissaries monitored her closely, Cleopatra continued to assert her dignity and control, even in captivity. Her final days were marked by preparation and planning, as she carefully arranged for her own death rather than submitting to the humiliation of being paraded through Rome. Cleopatra's choice to end her life on her own terms was both a personal and political decision, ensuring that Octavian could not use her as a symbol of Roman supremacy over the East. This decision reflects Cleopatra's enduring pride and fierce independence, qualities that had defined her rule and would continue to shape her legacy. Legend holds that Cleopatra, after bidding farewell to her children and close servants, ended her life by allowing an asp, a sacred symbol in Egyptian culture, to bite her. The asp's venomous bite symbolized Cleopatra's connection to Egyptian royalty, as the snake was associated with divine royalty and protection. Whether by asp or another method, Cleopatra's death was a deliberate, controlled act of defiance. In choosing her own death, she denied Octavian the satisfaction of parading her as a trophy and preserved her dignity as Egypt's last queen. The legend of the asp and the aftermath of her death. The story of Cleopatra's death became the stuff of legend almost immediately. Roman accounts of her death were filled with both admiration and vilification, as Octavian's regime sought to craft a narrative that would both celebrate his conquest and diminish Cleopatra's accomplishments. Cleopatra's choice to use an asp was symbolic, aligning her with Egypt's ancient traditions and asserting her place within Egypt's pantheon of legendary rulers. By dying in such a manner, Cleopatra communicated her defiance of Roman control and her connection to the divine traditions of her people. The true details of Cleopatra's death remain shrouded in mystery, with historians debating whether the asp was real or merely a symbol of her royal defiance. However, the story captured the imaginations of writers, poets, and artists for centuries, shaping Cleopatra's legacy as a powerful woman who met her end with bravery and autonomy. This act of self-determination immortalized her as a figure of tragic grandeur, a queen who chose to face death rather than endure the indignity of being paraded as a symbol of Rome's supremacy. Octavian, frustrated by Cleopatra's final act of defiance, sought to erase her legacy by subsuming Egypt entirely into the Roman Empire. He executed Caesarion, her son by Julius Caesar, to eliminate any claim to power that could challenge Rome's control. Cleopatra's surviving children with Antony were taken to Rome, where they were raised under the care of Octavia, Antony's former wife and Octavian's sister. Although they were spared, they lived in relative obscurity, with no influence over the future of Egypt. Cleopatra's death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of a new era in which Egypt would no longer be an independent kingdom but a valuable province in the vast Roman Empire. The end of Egypt's independence and the dawn of the Roman Empire. With Cleopatra's death, Egypt lost more than a queen. It lost its sovereignty, becoming a province of the Roman Empire. Alexandria, once a beacon of knowledge, culture, and wealth, was now a jewel in Rome's crown, its riches flowing into the coffers of the empire. Octavian's triumph was total. He returned to Rome as a hero, celebrated for his conquest of Egypt and the complete elimination of any opposition from the east. Octavian, now Augustus, would go on to become Rome's first emperor, consolidating his power and transforming the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire. The annexation of Egypt was a significant achievement for Rome, providing the empire with vital resources, especially Egypt's abundant grain supplies, which fed the growing population of Rome. Egypt's wealth and cultural treasures were absorbed into the empire, and Alexandria remained an important center of learning and commerce, even as it lost its status as an independent capital. The end of Egypt's independence marked the beginning of a new imperial era, with Cleopatra's death symbolizing the closing of one of history's most fascinating chapters. Cleopatra's legacy, however, endured. In Rome, her story was retold as both a cautionary tale and a symbol of Eastern decadence and intrigue. Roman writers portrayed her as a temptress who had seduced both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, using her beauty and charm to manipulate them for political gain. Yet even as they vilified her, the Romans were fascinated by her, and Cleopatra's story became emblematic of the tensions between East and West, between Rome's austere values and the exotic allure of the Egyptian queen who had dared to challenge them. Reinterpretations of Cleopatra through the ages. Throughout history, Cleopatra's life and legacy have been reinterpreted countless times. In the centuries following her death, she was portrayed in various ways, as a seductress, a skilled diplomat, a tragic heroine, and a powerful queen. Roman poets like Virgil and Horace depicted her as a symbol of excess and decadence, reinforcing Octavian's propaganda that portrayed her as a dangerous influence. This image of Cleopatra as an exotic temptress persisted in Western literature and art for centuries, shaping public perception of her as a figure defined by beauty and cunning rather than intelligence and leadership. During the Renaissance, Cleopatra's story was revived as a symbol of tragic romance and power, with artists and writers portraying her as a complex and compelling character who defied the norms of her time. Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra presented her as a charismatic and commanding figure, a woman who combined sensuality with strength and intelligence, capturing the imagination of audiences for generations. Shakespeare's Cleopatra was a multidimensional character who loved deeply, ruled wisely, and faced death with dignity, a portrayal that restored some of the depth and complexity that earlier Roman accounts had stripped away. In modern times, Cleopatra has become an icon of feminism and empowerment, celebrated as a woman who navigated a patriarchal world with skill, intelligence, and determination. Historians have increasingly recognized her accomplishments as a political leader and her dedication to preserving Egypt's independence in a time of relentless Roman expansion. Cleopatra's reputation as a brilliant and ambitious ruler has been reclaimed, with scholars emphasizing her contributions to Egyptian society and her role as one of the ancient world's most influential female leaders. Cleopatra's image has evolved with each era, reflecting the values and attitudes of the times. Yet through every retelling, certain qualities remain constant: her intelligence, her resilience, and her determination to defy expectations. Cleopatra's life, with all its triumphs and tragedies, continues to captivate and inspire, reminding the world of a queen who defied convention and carved out a legacy that endures to this day. How history remembers her power and influence. Cleopatra's legacy is one of resilience, defiance, and the pursuit of independence in a world dominated by powerful empires and rigid expectations. Despite the Romans' efforts to diminish her memory, Cleopatra's life and accomplishments have endured, transcending the propaganda and stereotypes that initially defined her. She is remembered not only as a queen but as a symbol of the struggle for sovereignty and self-determination, a ruler who sought to protect her kingdom against overwhelming odds. Cleopatra's legacy is a reminder of the challenges faced by women in leadership roles throughout history. Her life reflects the complexities of power, gender, and ambition, showcasing the ways in which a woman could wield authority in a male-dominated world. Cleopatra's intelligence, political acumen, and courage remain an inspiration, illustrating that true leadership requires not only strength but also vision and adaptability. In the end, Cleopatra's influence extended far beyond her lifetime. She became a symbol of both ancient Egypt's grandeur and the ongoing tension between East and West, a queen who defied Rome and left an indelible mark on history. Cleopatra's story endures as a powerful testament to the complexity of human ambition and the resilience of those who fight for their legacy. Chapter 10: Cleopatra's Legacy. Reinterpretations through time. Cleopatra VII's legacy has transcended centuries, her life and reign repeatedly reinterpreted by historians, artists, and writers. Almost immediately following her death, Cleopatra became a figure of fascination and controversy. Roman historians and poets, influenced by Octavian's propaganda, painted her as a temptress whose beauty and cunning led powerful men astray, nearly destabilizing the Roman Republic. This image of Cleopatra as an exotic seductress, crafted to serve Rome's agenda, became the foundation of her legacy in Western culture for centuries. Yet beneath the Roman stereotypes, Cleopatra's true legacy as a skilled ruler and diplomat endured. Renaissance thinkers revived her story, re-examining her life and recognizing her political acumen and intelligence. Artists began portraying her as a tragic heroine, a powerful woman caught between love and duty. William Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra immortalized her as a multidimensional figure, passionate and proud, intelligent and vulnerable. This portrayal marked a significant shift from Roman depictions, presenting her not merely as a seductress but as a sovereign who commanded respect and loyalty. During the 19th and 20th centuries, Cleopatra's story evolved alongside changing attitudes toward women's roles and empowerment. The suffragette movement and later feminist scholars reclaimed Cleopatra as a symbol of female strength and leadership, emphasizing her resilience in a male-dominated world. Historians began to focus on her accomplishments as a ruler, her dedication to Egypt's independence, and her ability to navigate the complex power dynamics between Egypt and Rome. Cleopatra's transformation from a vilified foreigner to a celebrated icon of feminist strength reflects the enduring flexibility of her legacy. In popular culture, Cleopatra remains a timeless icon. Films, literature, and art continue to explore her life, blending fact with fiction to create a captivating character who embodies intelligence, allure, and independence. The Cleopatra of Hollywood, portrayed famously by Elizabeth Taylor, became emblematic of both beauty and power, sparking a new wave of interest in her life and reign. This fusion of fact and myth has only deepened the mystery surrounding Cleopatra, solidifying her place as one of history's most compelling figures. Cleopatra's cultural and political impact. Cleopatra's influence extended beyond her immediate political ambitions, shaping Egypt's identity and reinforcing its unique position within the ancient world. By adopting Egyptian customs, speaking the Egyptian language, and presenting herself as the living embodiment of the goddess Isis, Cleopatra fostered a sense of unity among her people. Her reign symbolized a bridge between Greek and Egyptian traditions, honoring both her Macedonian heritage and her commitment to Egypt's cultural roots. Cleopatra's reign reinforced Egypt's status as a sophisticated and powerful civilization, an image that endured long after the kingdom became part of the Roman Empire. In aligning herself with Egyptian religious practices, Cleopatra strengthened her legitimacy as queen and forged a deep connection with her people. The cult of Isis, with which Cleopatra identified, was already popular in Egypt and spread to Rome and beyond. Through this identification, Cleopatra established herself as both a political and religious figure, wielding influence over her subjects that went beyond traditional authority. Her role as a divine ruler, connected to the ancient pantheon of Egypt's gods, reinforced the unique cultural identity of Egypt even as it came under Rome's control. Cleopatra's political legacy also includes her strategic alliances and diplomatic skill. She recognized the importance of forming alliances with Rome's most powerful figures, forging relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony that shaped the course of her reign. Her ability to balance these relationships, while maintaining her autonomy, underscores her diplomatic talent and her dedication to securing Egypt's sovereignty. Though her alliances ultimately drew her into conflict with Octavian, they also positioned Egypt as a significant player in Mediterranean politics, illustrating Cleopatra's influence and resilience as a leader. A queen of influence, lessons in leadership. Cleopatra's leadership style, characterized by intelligence, adaptability, and charisma, offers timeless lessons in governance and resilience. Unlike many rulers of her time, Cleopatra understood the importance of connecting with her people. By embracing both Greek and Egyptian customs, she demonstrated a respect for her kingdom's diverse heritage, a move that fostered loyalty and unity. Her ability to command loyalty, even in the face of formidable challenges, underscores her strength as a leader who valued both her subjects and her sovereignty. Cleopatra's adaptability also contributed to her success as a ruler. She navigated shifting alliances, internal revolts, and external threats with pragmatism and foresight. Her willingness to engage with Rome's most powerful leaders, even when doing so posed personal risks, reflects her commitment to Egypt's future. This adaptability allowed Cleopatra to maintain control over her kingdom for nearly 2 decades, despite the relentless pressure of Rome's growing influence. Her reign stands as a testament to the power of resilience and strategic thinking in the face of overwhelming odds. Perhaps most importantly, Cleopatra's legacy highlights the power of self-determination. Her decision to take her own life rather than face humiliation in Octavian's triumph reflects a profound sense of autonomy and dignity. Cleopatra's final act was a refusal to be reduced to a symbol of Roman victory, a decision that preserved her legacy as a proud and independent ruler. In choosing to control her fate, Cleopatra left the world on her own terms, an act of defiance that has inspired generations. How Cleopatra continues to inspire. Cleopatra's life story continues to captivate and inspire people around the world, transcending cultural and historical boundaries. She embodies the struggle for sovereignty, the complexity of leadership, and the resilience of those who defy convention. Cleopatra's intelligence, courage, and ambition resonate with modern audiences, who see in her story a powerful example of a woman who refused to be constrained by her circumstances. In a world where powerful female leaders were rare, Cleopatra demonstrated that women could wield authority and shape the course of history. Her accomplishments remind us that leadership is not defined by gender but by vision, resilience, and the ability to inspire others. Cleopatra's legacy challenges the traditional narratives of power and influence, showing that effective leadership requires both strength and adaptability. Cleopatra's story has also become a touchstone for those who value cultural identity and diversity. Her embrace of Egyptian traditions, despite her Macedonian heritage, illustrates the importance of respecting and valuing the cultures one governs. In an increasingly globalized world, Cleopatra's example of cultural integration and respect for diversity holds valuable lessons for modern leaders. Finally, Cleopatra's legacy serves as a reminder of the importance of self-determination. Her decision to end her life rather than submit to Roman conquest was a powerful statement of autonomy, reflecting her refusal to be defined by the victors of her time. Cleopatra's courage in the face of defeat remains an enduring testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of personal agency. The enduring power of Cleopatra's legacy. Cleopatra's life and reign mark the end of an era in ancient history, yet her influence extends far beyond her time. As the last pharaoh of Egypt, she symbolized the end of an ancient civilization's independence, an ending that heralded the rise of the Roman Empire. But Cleopatra's story is more than just a historical footnote. It is a legacy that has continued to inspire and provoke reflection on the nature of power, gender, and ambition. In the centuries since her death, Cleopatra has become an icon of resilience, intellect, and independence. Her life challenges us to question traditional narratives, inviting us to see beyond the myths and recognize the depth of her contributions to history. Cleopatra's reign was a testament to the possibilities of female leadership and the importance of cultural respect, qualities that continue to resonate in a world that is still grappling with issues of gender equality and cultural diversity. As history's lens continues to shift, Cleopatra's legacy will undoubtedly evolve, reflecting the changing values and aspirations of each generation. But one thing remains certain: Cleopatra, the queen who defied an empire, will always be remembered as a ruler who fought for her people, her kingdom, and her legacy. Her story is a reminder of the power of resilience and the enduring impact of those who dare to challenge the conventions of their time. Conclusion: Cleopatra's enduring power and the changing role of women in leadership. Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt, stands as a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Her life was a testament to the power of leadership and self-determination, qualities that have secured her place in history as one of antiquity's most influential figures. Cleopatra's reign may have ended with her tragic death, but her legacy has transcended the centuries, continuing to inspire generations who see in her story a powerful example of courage and ambition. Throughout her life, Cleopatra demonstrated that leadership transcends gender and origin. In an era when women were often relegated to the background, Cleopatra ruled as a sovereign, embracing her role as a political leader, diplomat, and warrior. Her ability to command loyalty and wield influence in a male-dominated world challenged the norms of her time, offering a powerful narrative of female empowerment. Cleopatra's story reminds us that effective leadership is defined not by one's gender or background but by vision, resilience, and the ability to inspire those one leads. The challenges Cleopatra faced, political instability, foreign aggression, and cultural tensions, reflect the complexities of leadership that remain relevant today. Her willingness to engage with Rome's most powerful leaders, even when such alliances entailed significant personal risk, reveals a pragmatic and fearless approach to diplomacy. Cleopatra's story underscores the importance of adaptability, a quality that enabled her to navigate the ever-shifting dynamics of the ancient Mediterranean and maintain her throne for nearly 2 decades. Cleopatra's legacy also highlights the significance of cultural respect and integration. As a Greek Macedonian ruling over an Egyptian kingdom, Cleopatra bridged 2 worlds, embracing Egyptian customs and traditions while honoring her Macedonian heritage. Her decision to present herself as the living embodiment of Isis was more than a political strategy. It was an affirmation of her connection to Egypt and its people. Cleopatra's ability to blend these identities reflects a profound understanding of cultural respect and inclusivity, values that resonate in an increasingly globalized world. Her story also serves as a reminder of the challenges women in leadership have faced throughout history. Cleopatra's life, shaped by ambition and intelligence, reflects the courage required for women to claim and wield power. The legacy she left behind is a testament to the potential of female leaders who, despite societal constraints, have shaped the course of history. Cleopatra's defiance against Rome's supremacy, her devotion to her people, and her refusal to submit to a predetermined fate are qualities that continue to inspire those who seek to overcome obstacles in pursuit of their own paths. In the end, Cleopatra's death marked the fall of ancient Egypt as a sovereign kingdom, but her life embodied the spirit of a nation. As the last of the Ptolemies, Cleopatra symbolized both the culmination of a dynasty and the resilience of a culture that had withstood centuries of change. Her legacy endures as a reminder that leadership is as much about tenacity and vision as it is about the ability to face defeat with dignity. Cleopatra's story, from her rise to power to her final defiance, invites us to reflect on the enduring qualities of leadership and the transformative power of those who dare to challenge the status quo. As we look back on Cleopatra's life, we find inspiration in her ambition, her intelligence, and her unwavering dedication to her people. Her reign was an era of cultural richness, political complexity, and resilience, qualities that echo across the ages. Cleopatra's story reminds us that history's greatest figures are those who, even in the face of insurmountable odds, fight not only for their own legacy but for the future of those they lead. Cleopatra's legacy is a lasting testament to the strength of a queen who, against all odds, carved her place in history and left an indelible mark on the world. With this final reflection, the story of Cleopatra reaches its conclusion, but her influence continues to resonate, inspiring new generations to recognize the power of resilience, intelligence, and independence.